Good morning, kiddos. It's Jocelyn. While we're waiting to get set up for this morning, let's just do a quick little check-in in the chat. So if you're on your phone, drop your name, an emoji to describe your mood, and maybe something that you took away from yesterday's healing arts group with Talana. So do that in the chat while we're getting set up. And yeah.
Okay. Sorry, there's something in my throat. Okay. Hi, everyone. Whew. Okay. Welcome. Today we are going to be talking about power and control. Power and control. And so actually what I want to do is, I know some of y'all are answering the check-in, just how you're feeling and how, I don't know what's going on in my face, how Healing Arts was yesterday. But also today's topic, right, is power and control. So what I want us to start like thinking about is, when do you feel you're most powerful? So take a minute, whatever you need to think about that. And if you can drop in the chat when you feel you're most powerful. So I see, one second. So I see Christine said, I feel my most powerful when I'm writing. That's amazing. When, after I'm goated? I don't know what that means. Sure, I'm out in nature, when I speak up for what I feel is right, when I speak up, when your voice is being heard, when I stand up and speak for others, when I'm surrounded by people who love and support me, my gosh, they're moving so fast, my brain. When I have been learning and my tasks are completed. Okay, nice. After I accomplish something, making a change for the better. When I'm right about something, can be an argument or even just a simple question. Yeah, it feels really good to be right. When I'm heard and listened to, yes. When I use my voice as art, poetry, writing, and performance. When people are genuinely listening to me, yes, right? Like there's two different types of listening. I often say like someone can hear you but not be listening to you, right? Like those are two very different experiences. I feel my most powerful when I beat someone in a debate. Yes. Okay. When I accomplish when I accomplish a strong, hard challenge. When I'm educating someone on a certain topic that they think is wrong and creating change in my community. Amen. That's amazing. That's what y'all are here to do. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah, so you can keep like throwing in to the chat when you feel you're most powerful. But I want to ask Jocelyn. Jocelyn, when do you feel you're most powerful?
I'm so sorry. Would you say, Hannah? I'm so sorry. I wasn't even in the room. I'm so sorry. I'm being totally honest. I wasn't in the room.
It's okay. Look at us. We're fine. When do you feel you're most powerful, Jocelyn?
I feel my most powerful. Please don't make fun of me. But like when I finally get the courage to put on my workout clothes and go work out, and then I'll just like go for a walk or a jog or whatever. And when it's over, I'm like, wow, I could eat a brick right now. I feel like so just incredibly strong and like fearless because like all of my anxiety's gone because the endorphins and the serotonin levels are really high. So like my anxiety's gone.
Right.
I feel like all of my problems are totally fixable. So yeah, it's definitely when I've like done something for myself to make myself feel better, like athletically.
Nice. Yeah, I think for me, I used to say when, pre-COVID that I feel my most powerful when I'm like on metro or walking on the streets with my noise canceling headphones with like Megan Thee Stallion blasting. And I'm just like walking like it's a runway. And like, I know
Yes.
I clock men catcalling at me and I go, not today, Satan.
You go, not today, because I'll run through your house like the Tomb Raider.
But I think, now in this reality, I think I'm just like reflecting back to the past few months. And I think for me, what I've noticed, I really feel powerful when I'm in an environment with people who are fighting for the same thing, right? Like I'm thinking about going to the protests for Black Lives Matter and like just being in a crowd of like 100,000 people and we're all chanting the same thing. And I feel powerful when I'm in that space because I feel less alone in sentiments, right? Yeah, I think that's like when I feel my most powerful because I'm taking to the streets. Because it's hard to feel powerful behind a computer screen. It's important.
Right.
It's important. Yep. You do important work behind the computer screen, but it just doesn't feel the same.
That's not feel the same. It's not. It's just not the same. It's not realistic.
Just not the same. But yeah, I'm really happy to hear from all of you. Those were some exciting answers to this question about when you feel you're most powerful. And I just want to ask you to kind of like notice what you said and what came to mind, and then really tap into that, right? Like when you are feeling disempowered, right? Like we live in a society that is designed to make us feel little, right? Like to make us feel small. And I just want you to remember that, like, look at this group we have together. We are very powerful as a group. And you all are like, this is the first week and y'all are like going off on the chat all the time. And it's just so exciting to watch, like how you're all connecting so quickly. So I just want us all to remember that we can be powerful. And so like clock what you said, right? Like, and notice if other people said the same thing, and then try to tap into that in those moments of powerlessness, right? Because that can be overwhelming. And again, the systems are designed to make us feel that way. So it's important to remember that we are not powerless. So today we're going to be talking about power and control for a few different reasons, right? Power is the root of a lot of injustices, right? Power is intoxicating. But what's also important is like power can be used for good and for bad, right? There are abuses of power, and then there is empowerment. So it's always important that we understand, talking about power, we have to kind of hold these two contradictory things at the same time, right? Like we kind of have to acknowledge that it can be abused and it's violent, but it can be used for good, right? So that's why I like to start these conversations off with asking y'all when you feel you're most powerful, right? But today we're going to be really looking at power in terms of relationships, right? Like we are here to talk about interpersonal relationships. We're here to fight for social change, but we're also here to really focus on interpersonal violence, right? And when I say interpersonal, that's just a fancy term for saying like relationships, right? So that's what we are all about, right? Like we're about addressing violence in relationships. And so to do that, we have to talk about power. So I'm going to share a whiteboard, and I want us to think about the term power. What does the term power bring up for you? Dominance, strength, yep. Empowerment, courage, confidence, strong, belittlement, control, okay, acceptance and gratitude, powerful statements, leadership, control, strength and capability, men, lol, unbalance, risk taker, okay, wealthy, interesting. So I like that we're using, like we're kind of thinking about what power is defined by, but we're also looking at who has power. Independency, yes, right, okay. So we at Peace Over Violence have our own definitions of stuff, right? Like you learned about this on Tuesday, that we spend a lot of time thinking about language, right? Because language is really important, and language directly influences our ability to name things, right? To name our experience, to recognize our experience. But language is also really multi-layered, right? Like the same word doesn't have the same definition for two people, right? I often use the example of, say someone says the word cat, right? When I say the word cat, you all have an immediate response or image in your mind that comes up when I say cat, right? And all of those experiences of the word cat are different, right? So it's really important that we spend some time looking at language and making sure we're all using the language the same way. So so we have our own definition of power. Jocelyn, do you have that definition?
I have my trusty In Touch with Teens binder, and we're going to define power really quick, okay?
So
Okay.
And also definitions, Jocelyn and I don't always remember them off the top of our head.
I don't remember them off the top of my head.
Especially when there's a pandemic. And my brain doesn't work the same way it used to pre-pandemic. So anyway,
Yeah.
yes, I'm ready.
Power is having ability or authority. That's all I have.
That's it.
That's it. And then did you want to define control?
Not yet.
Okay, got you.
So that's what power is, right? Power is, and again, these are basic definitions. You could look up in the dictionary power and it'd be like 3 pages long, right? But in its most basic sense, power is having ability or authority, right? And so then there's this idea of control, right? So what comes up for you all when you hear the word control? Stability, okay. Also, I'm not drinking pee, it's lemon water, okay, so just, yeah.
You know what, because for a second I was like, wow, I think she might be drinking urine. So thank you for clearing that up.
White people do weird things, so we just never know, but I'm just saying this is not that situation.
You're right.
Okay.
I was actually going to ask you, like, how are you surviving in this heat?
Not well. Not well, Jocelyn, not well.
I really regret the decision to have made this wig. So hot.
So my English Irish heritage comes out and I'm just like, this is why we don't immigrate, okay? I should have stayed there. Why did my parents
Why did they do this? Why did they bring me here? Oh my gosh.
Okay, so for control, I see influence, manipulation, authority, racism, telling people what to do, influence them. Amazing. So yes, those were all very accurate, but our definition of control is
Definition of control is, sorry, ADD. Control is exerting influence or impact on direction or change.
Okay, hold up. Exerting influence or
impact on direction or change.
okay.
That is a really concise definition of control. Let me just tell you.
It really is.
It's really concise. I love it.
So, what did I do? Okay. So when we, oh my gosh. Okay, I don't know how to move it. But anyway, okay, so when we look at these definitions side by side, right? So power is having ability or authority. Control is exerting influence or impact on direction or change. Those things are a little different, right? And it's important that we understand that we have a little bit of power and a little bit of control in small ways and large ways, right? So think about, does anybody raise your hand if you have pets in your household? Okay, oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
So lots of people have a pet. I too have a pet. Here, I'll show you. This is Rio. That's her butt. Okay, so, right, you get to decide when your pet eats, when your pet goes on a walk. And that in and of itself is you influencing a change, right? And you also having the ability or authority to decide when that happens, right? So again, might be a small way in which you have power. You also have some power and control in some decisions you make, right? Like we know that we live in a complex system that influences our decisions and doesn't always make choices accessible to everybody equally. But we have some control, right? In a situation in which you are assigned homework, right? You have the control or power to decide to do that or not. But also, right, there might be someone else in your household that has the power and control to decide if you do that or not, right? Maybe you live in an environment where helicopters circle on a regular basis, right? Like where police patrol regularly, where gangs are prevalent in your neighborhood, right? Say you hear gunshots, that might change your ability to sit down and do some homework, right? Because that's now a traumatizing situation in which your attention is forced somewhere else, right? But it's important that we think about the ways that we have some power and control. Now, when we also think about power and control, we also have power and control in our relationships, but sometimes that power and control can be imbalanced, right? So a healthy relationship is when both people have equal power and control, right? When both people feel safe saying what's on their mind and what their needs are, right? An abusive relationship is when there's an imbalance of power and control, right? So one person has power and control and the other doesn't. So we actually draw, let me see if I can draw, but we use a visual for this, right? So first I'm gonna write the word. So we have the term abuse, right? And we're going to talk way more about abuse when we get into cycles of violence, sexual violence, all these things. But we can break down the term abuse this way, right? And what we might do is can I move this? Okay. Damn, y'all, I miss whiteboards so much. Actual whiteboards. Not whatever this is. Okay.
And remember, you all can ask questions in the chat while Hannah's drawing. You're more than welcome to answer questions or ask questions in the chat.
Interrupt me all the time. So do we see what I did there? I broke down the term abuse, right, into, is there a question? Okay. Into abnormal use of power and control, right? Again, because we all have some level of power, we all have some level of control, but when that power and control is abused or used to do violence, right? That's why that's when a relationship becomes abusive, right? Abigail raised her hand. Talk to me, Abigail. Wait, can I let you talk? Let's see. 1 second.
I have no idea how to do that in a webinar.
I can stop sharing my screen for a second and I think I can do it. 1 second. Y'all, I'm too old to learn new technology. Okay.
I'm looking right now. You said it was Abigail. Abigail does have her, wait, that's his angel.
I see a few.
Oh, there's Abigail.
I'm just gonna go in order. Okay. Talk to us.
Jacqueline. Well, got it. Jacqueline, did you want to, because your hand was up? Okay, let's go to Sarai. 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 Sounds of the room. Sarai.
We're gonna bring up Sarai.
My hand was up because you guys mentioned something to raise your hand up, so it was up for a while. Yeah, I think it was the same for the other person.
Oh, got it. It was I think it was the pet question.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, y'all. I can't see when you raise hands, so I thought they were new. But thank you for explaining. We're a mess, but we're doing it. Okay.
We're doing it. Okay, cool.
So yeah, so why don't you just put your, if you want to ask a question, just put it in the chat, or
Oh
again,
yeah, just put it in the Q&A.
use the Q&A too. That's a great way. That way we won't get confused.
Real quick, when I answer the questions publicly, can everyone see the answers? That's one thing I don't know, because ever since Monday or Tuesday, I've been answering the questions
They're
in
saying,
this little Q&A chat, but I don't know if everyone else is getting a chance to see them. They're saying yes? Okay, cool. Perfect.
y'all are amazing. Thank you.
Y'all are literally like the best.
Yeah,
I want y'all to lead a Zoom training on how to use Zoom.
Once you finish
Like-
this, you guys take over, please. I need it. We don't know what we're doing. We're too old.
Do you want to do this? It'd be great.
Okay. So let's see.
We left off with an abnormal use of power and imbalance in relationships. The question was asked if that imbalance and that abuse applies to familial relationships. The answer to that question was yes. Boom.
Okay. Yes. So this is why we're talking about power and control, right? Because I want us to be clear about something, right? And we're going to get into this a lot when we talk about domestic violence, teen dating violence, sexual violence. But when you think about it, right, sexual violence, a sexual assault, a rape, that's an abnormal use of power and control. Domestic violence, when one person decides they are going to decide what that person does, where that person can go, if they can have a job or not, right? That is an abnormal use of power and control. If a partner of yours says, let me see your phone, I need your passwords, right? I need to look at who you've been talking to. That's an abnormal use of power and control, right? Yeah.
Just to connect our previous training on Tuesday to this, what Hannah is saying, just to build that perspective, with the examples that Hannah's giving, if you listen, like for instance, taking your partner's cell phone and like demanding it, that sounds like a jealous partner. And remember we were saying on Tuesday that when people don't have positive and healthy alternatives to their natural human emotions that are in their brains and their bodies, usually violence can occur. So jealousy, like I said, is totally normal to feel in your body, but the minute that it leaves your body, the minute that the energy leaves your body in action through verbs, whatever, then that is an abuse of power, control. It can turn into violence. Even if the person who is like, and I have to build this perspective in relationships, even if the person in the relationship that is abusive is smaller than their partner, and even if they go to have a violent reaction to their partner and lose, that relationship is still violent and toxic. So I just want to build that perspective that the examples that Hannah's giving are all rooted, because remember Tuesday's training was roots of violence. It's rooted in people not having positive alternatives to normal human emotion. If they just knew how to handle their emotions, then reactions could be a little bit more healthier explained. But we're going to get that in our future trainings on how to do that.
Yes.
The question that was asked in the chat, I'm going to answer the Q&A. I'm going to type the answer to the Q&A, but this question in the chat is, what if this happens in a parent-child relationship, referring to the phone example? Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. And then I love your perspective too, Jocelyn. Again, that's a relationship in which there's an imbalance of power and control, right? And again, there are every time we enter a room, every relationship we ever walk into, there's an imbalance of power and control. It's about if you use that power and control to your advantage and to do harm, right? Jocelyn is a Black woman, I am a white woman. When we are in a room together, society has told me and acts this way that I have more power. Now, if I use that power to do harm to Jocelyn, that would be an abnormal use of power and control, right? But again, power and control in and of themselves aren't necessarily bad, right? And it's the same in a relationship with a parent, right? There's an imbalance of power and control. Now, a parent can definitely abuse that power and control, right? In the same way that it can happen in a relationship, in the same way it can happen in a friendship, right? And especially, they already have an advantage as that is a narrative that we all have, right? Parent-child relationships are kind of dictated by this idea that one person is in charge. But if you are a healthy parent, right, like one of the things you would do is try to make that imbalance less so, right? Try to get to know your child, especially teens, right? Like you're all teens. Try to get to know your teen who's now a person with their own thoughts, their own opinions, right?
Their own favorite foods, their own friends.
Yes, because you've grown up, and the more you grow up, the more power and control you have, right? And so in a healthy parent relationship, right, that might be how it would be approached, right, to get to know your child. But of course, we also know that our parents are traumatized. Just the same way we are traumatized, our parents are traumatized, right? And Jocelyn and I talk about this all the time. Trauma, if you were born in this country, you have trauma.
Period. Period. Yep. Hello, you're welcome. Welcome to America. like,
I mean, and again, I'm not saying we all have the same level of trauma. That is 100% not true, right?
Or that we respond the same way, because we don't respond the same way.
Or have access to the same resources to deal with that trauma.
Yep.
But just like opening the news is a type of trauma, right? You know, seeing that there are children in cages, seeing that people are dying, right? Seeing all of these things, that's traumatic. Now, all of us have that, and our parents have trauma too. And again, we never say trauma is an excuse, right? If you do something violent, you are making a choice and a decision to use your power and control to do something violent. That is a choice. Now, do we often feel like we don't have choices? 100%, right? But we still made a choice to do something violent, so we need to be held accountable for that, right? But at the same time, we need to acknowledge what led to that use of violence, right? Like what Jocelyn was saying, we are not taught emotional intelligence, right? We are not taught how to handle our emotions. And there are certain communities, right, specifically the Black community, that are taught that they are attacked when they reveal their emotions, right? So again,
and I want to actually speak to that a little bit. That emotional intelligence that we all seek really boils down to having positive outlets for our feelings, even when they're feelings of joy. Some people can't handle feelings of joy, and it feels like anxiety in their body, like chemically in the brain, excitement and anxiety feel like the exact same thing. But depending on what's happened to you in your life, depends on how you translate that feeling in your body. For instance, I am terrified of roller coasters. I almost fell off of a roller coaster when I was a kid in the middle of a loop, mid-loop, going 100 miles per hour. I do not like roller coasters. So when I'm near them, my stomach feels like it's just going to explode and pterodactyls are going to fly out. But I have that exact same feeling when I'm about to perform. And I love performing. And people are like, how can you perform in front of 20,000 people? Because I just absolutely love it. But for them, it feels like a million pterodactyls are going to fly out of their stomach. It's the exact same feeling. It really just depends on how you attach to it. And so when you don't have positive, alternatives for your feelings, sure, violence can occur. But when you have those positive things in place, you have better control over yourself, and it makes you feel more empowered, which is the whole purpose of this training. So when Hannah's speaking of the Black experience where our voicing our emotions can be seen as like a bad thing, when we know ourselves, we feel empowered and we feel in control of our feelings. And Hannah's going to get to this in our training. But when someone else here's our empowerment, and here's the Black empowerment or the Black self-control, they, who may be a person like this insecure, or they may not know themselves, or they don't have a positive alternative to their human emotion of feeling triggered by seeing an empowered Black person, because again, the USA, trauma, they can usually abuse their power by trying to disempower a Black person. Did I make that connection well enough, Hannah? Okay. So like that's something that I want to keep in mind too, that you could be totally on your way having positive outlook, and then someone could still trigger you in a way or make you feel disempowered and put you in a situation of abuse because of your empowerment. So that's how power and control works. Because even when you, a Black person, feel so powerful, someone who is of a different, more privileged demographic, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a supervisor, whether it's a parent, whether it's a bully, someone that is in like a more authoritative or has a little bit more power or control or popularity, can make you feel disempowered. And that is abuse.
Yes, 100%, right? And that's all we're talking about is like power. We all have power, but some of us have access to certain resources or outlets that others don't, right? Nothing is equal. And so, I mean, that was a very long answer to the parent question. Jasmine says, do you mean that a person may feel threatened by one's power or presence?
I would say yes. And in this chapter of Power and Control, we talk about like self-esteem. And one of the things about self-esteem, right? If anyone has seen Cat Williams, he says it's esteem of yourself. Sure. Yes, self-esteem plays a role in how someone can disempower another person. Someone who doesn't have a lot of self-control can feel insecure. I mean, not self-control, self-esteem. Someone with not a lot of self-esteem can feel insecure by seeing someone with a lot of self-esteem. And so the way that they make themselves feel better is by like, maybe talking about that person to someone else to build an alliance with someone, and then they're feeding on each other's insecurities. And I'm sure you've been in school long enough to see how cliques are formed. Like, and I don't know about Hannah, but like, I was kind of the person that was always on like the inside, but also on the outside. Like I was like, people knew me and I was popular, like cool, whatever. But I always felt awkward. So I always forced myself on the outside. And in that space, I got to see how even the most popular students were the most insecure. And they took their insecurities out on students who were like outcasts, who were like, and I'm putting this in quotes because it was always assumed what they knew about someone. Oh, they look smart. She dresses well, so she must be rich, which means she must not know how to fight. And so it's like these kinds of like insecurities that where they form this group alliance, and that group alliance is power. When you have more than one person and y'all are all coming together talking, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, but like when y'all are coming together and like in cahoots, that is power against one person. And then that is where that insecurity, a whole kerfuffle of insecurity can be taken out on one person. I'm gonna answer these Q&As if you wanted to get to the chat stuff. Like, give me 1 second to get
I just wanted to add that, right, like what Jocelyn's talking about again is this, what the term I use is interpersonal, right? Like relationships, like two individuals, one individual making another individual feel a certain way and feeling attacked, right, by their confidence or something, right? But then think about this again, because we're talking about interpersonal, again, all of these things are connected to the larger picture of structural, right? Like, so the systems we have. And look at how in the past few years, right, the response of a men's rights activist, right? That is a direct response to someone being in power for so long and then feeling insecure because suddenly other communities are feeling empowered, that they decide to go on the defensive, right? So again, you have to think, yeah, they are infuriating, but you have to think about how when we challenge power, right? If we are not comfortable in ourselves, or if all we care about is power, then that's going to feel like an attack, right? And so again, there's this idea, we can see this on the larger scale of men's rights activists, of white people, right, responding to this kind of perceived notion that communities of color are gaining equal rights, right? So then there's this like fear, like they're gonna take my job, right? They're gonna take from me, take. So again, it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing. All these things look exactly the same on a larger scale and on a smaller scale. And what I want to say, and the reason we're talking about power so much, is that abuse happens and exerting power and control happens when power and control have been taken from you. All acts of violence are someone exerting or using power and control against another person. And usually that stems from the fact that they feel like power and control was taken away from them. School bullies, right, are a great example. We've seen that lots of times a bully at school is someone who in their home, in their community, does not have power. They may be in a situation in which they experience domestic violence, right? Like their parents are screaming at each other every day. They may be living in a situation in which one of their parents is incarcerated, or maybe both are, right? And so they live with grandma and they don't feel very powerful in that situation. Maybe they are being abused directly, right, from a community member. We often see when power and control is taken away from us, we think the only way to get it back is by taking it away from another person. And that's why sexual violence, domestic violence, teen dating violence, the root of all of these is power and control. People are not raped because of what they are wearing.
At all.
People are not abused because of something they did, right? People are raped and people are abused because someone is taking power and control from them because they feel like they don't have power and control. And it's intoxicating, right? Like it's intoxicating to gain power. But unfortunately, that intoxication is usually used at the expense of someone else, right? So we are going to be talking next week about the cycle of abuse, right? Because these things are cycles. But it's really important that we understand that all of these things, men's rights activists, incels, they feel like they don't have power, so they do commit violence to take that power away from someone else. Okay, so I'm also going to check the Q&A real quick. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. Oh, no questions. Okay. I'm going to check the chat while Jocelyn's out. So
if you want, there was actually, I answered some questions, but if you wanted to use them as an opportunity, I thought they were really great questions too.
Let me look.
Yeah, like I don't know if, but especially there's a question about bullying. There's a question about the school to prison pipeline and how that's a form of power and control abuse. And I thought that's a really dope question.
Oh my God, yeah.
But yeah, give me 1 second, I'll be right back.
Yeah, of course. I'm also going to look at the chat real quick. So Brenda said the problems of how the power is happening, you have to see what is good and bad. Yoko said hurt people. Yeah, right? Like we have like terms for this type of stuff. Christine says it's interesting because many abusers themselves are victims of abuse. Exactly, right? That's someone who's had their power and control taken away from them. So then they feel like they have to take it back, right? By doing it to somebody else. But we're also going to be looking at how different types of media influence how we, like what a normal relationship is in our heads.
Also, in regards to the prison pipeline system, weren't you the one that told me about that statistic of death row inmates?
Oh,
and
yes.
Okay, so please connect that to the prison pipeline system and blow these kids' minds.
Oh, yeah, I don't remember the exact number, but it's like 90 something, right? Like,
I think it's like 92 or 91 or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how many of you know this, but 90 to 91% of folks who are on death row experience child sexual abuse. I mean, I remember learning this and being like, well, duh, right? So we're talking about the majority of people who have put on death row. And why do we put people on death row, right? Like we say for like very extreme acts of violence. Sorry, 1 second, my dog is, Jeremy. What? Rio's attacking herself. Sorry, my dog's attacking. Can you? Okay, sorry. We got a dog from a rescue last month, and so she has some stuff to work out. Okay, anyway, so yes, so 91, 92%, and we can follow up with the actual statistic of men, right, on death row experience child sexual abuse, right? So then think about that and think about the acts of violence that are committed. And usually those are instances in which you, as a child, if you are abused, you have had no sense of power for a very, very, very long time, right? My dog is distracting me. And so the school to prison pipeline is another instance of the abuse of power and control, right? We don't like to invest in communities. We don't like to invest in youth. We like to separate, classify, and separate folks so that we have better control of a situation, right? And one thing I like to mention too, because the school to prison pipeline, like most things, tends to focus on boys, right? Usually Black and brown boys. And while that is a huge issue, right? Girls, Black girls are pushed out of schools at an alarming rate, right? Yeah.
Okay, I haven't told the story in like a very long time, but I have to.
Okay.
Just to speak to what you're saying. I got invited to a conference in DC. And as I'm leaving the conference to like go for the end of the day with some of the attendees, there are 4 girls on the train. And they're like dressed, they're about to go to a party or something like that. It's like a Friday or Saturday night. And after a few stops on the train, 4 Black boys get on the train. So it was originally 4 Black girls, now 4 Black boys have gotten on the train. And the 2 like leaders or like most like vocal of the group, the one girl and the one guy, they're talking. And their conversation is exactly what you're talking about. So in this conversation, the young girl's like, so what are you doing? Like, where you been? And he's like, oh, well, I got kicked out, but you know, I played baseball. So I kind of just like figured it out. Now I'm on my way to college. He's like, where have you been? She's like, oh, I got kicked out too, like around the same time, but I haven't been able to go back. It had been 2 years. And in 2 years, he was able to like figure it out. But for her, it was just like the way it was obviously a longer conversation, which I won't go into detail, but she basically was like talking about how many hurdles she had to go through, like being accused of being pregnant, being accused of like, there were just so many things like, oh, where are your kids? Why aren't you in school? Is it because you're a mom now? And she's like, no, I just got kicked out for fighting like regular kids do. And so it had been 2 years. Now she's 18, didn't graduate school, and he's on his way to college. And yes, like they both had the exact same barriers, but as the conversation stated, they both got kicked out for fighting around the same time. Mm-hmm. And look how different it was.
It's such a different situation. And again, like, you know, we even, in most movements, right, the focus, because we talk about this, right, like there's different types of power and people hold different types of power based off of what their identities are, right? And still, like men, whether Black or brown, have more power over Black and brown women and girls, right? So of course, when there's these interconnections, right? So it's important that we understand how our power plays into different situations, right? But I just also saw like someone talking about school police, and again, so like talking about the prison industrial complex, that's a situation in which it's designed, right? Like we've been talking about this, it's designed to do this, right? It's designed to divide people up, right? And affect their trajectory in life, right? Yeah. And so the way we view punishment, right? The way we view acting out, right? White kids are allowed to act out, right? They're allowed to act out and get angry and maybe like review, like as Jocelyn was talking about, like reveal their emotions, right? Whereas when similar things happen to a Black or brown kid, right, the police are called. And when the police are in schools, I know you know this, but when the police are in school and the police are the ones dealing with this situation, you are a 13-year-old, you are a 16-year-old, and you are now arrested for getting into a fight on campus, in which most schools you would be suspended, right?
Right.
Those are
Right.
two very different responses that have lifelong implications. Suspension, while of course leads to further exclusion, right, and expulsion often, that's a different outcome than being arrested and now having a record, right? And that's something a mistake was made, emotions got to you, and now that's something on your record for the rest of your life, right?
Yep.
And will be used against you. Anyway, I'm gonna fall apart.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Systems have power, individuals have power. Yes.
I was going to say, did you want to transition into abusive power, insecurity, self-esteem, and fear?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we've talked about this.
I was going to say, I think we kind of did.
Yeah, but the reason we talk about power so much is because power is why violence happens.
Yes.
Power is why violence happens.
Yes.
When we've had our power and control taken away from us, either by another person, right? Like a bully or a parent, or by a system, right? We are going to do whatever it takes to regain that power. And so we've seen people who are disempowered rape someone in order to feel more powerful. And that's the key, right? All of this is connected, and power and control is at the root of this, right? So no one is raped for what they're wearing. No one is raped because they were drinking, right? They are raped because someone wanted to abuse their power and control over someone, and someone wanted to gain power and control from taking it away from someone else, right? So yeah, we're gonna be talking about power a lot in the next few weeks, right? But we're gonna be talking about different types of violence. So that's kind of all we have to talk about, right? Like, of course, like what we're looking at is insecurity can come from directly from lived experience, right? And access to resources, access to systems, senses of power that can happen within the home, right? Like feeling powerful and feeling loved within the home, but also feeling loved by systems and included in systems, right? So, but all of this comes from power and control. I feel like I've said power and control 20 million.
Well, I was actually going to say, did you want to connect power to privilege? Because I was gonna like connect and like have a brief discussion about privilege, because so like there are a lot of conversations about privilege, and I'm realizing as time goes on and the more like people become more educated, they're more commonly used to hearing white privilege and only white privilege. And I just want to make it clear to these amazing youth that we have that there are other forms of privilege, and that those other forms of privileges can also lead to an imbalance of power, and how people may perpetuate the disempowerment of a certain demographic because of their privilege. So like examples that I always bring up, I always use myself as an example so that people can understand. I have light skin privilege, I have cis woman privilege, I am a college graduate, that's a privilege. No matter what I think of my parents, both of them were in the home, that's a privilege. There are a bunch of areas in which I have to constantly check my privilege. And so when we have these conversations, like you might be in spaces, sorry, like I don't know what the hell. So like you might be in spaces where you may experience someone who is abusing their power. And sometimes it's hard to identify where that power of theirs is coming from. And you can usually figure out where their power is coming from or not coming from based on what their privilege is. And sometimes you can check somebody else's privilege before they do. Like I'm always in conversations with Black men, reminding them that they have male privilege. And when you have male privilege, you do not have as many hurdles as women have to overcome, no matter what your race is. Male privilege is still a thing. Men will still talk to you first before they talk to a woman because they think that you are the authority in the situation. So you have to constantly be checking your privilege. When people don't check their privilege, they can feel disempowered and then abuse power they actually have. It can seem strange, but that's just kind of how American society is set up, to make people feel disempowered, but at the same time giving them power. It's very weird. But if you can keep in mind that you may be in spaces where you yourself have privilege, and you might be feeling insecure because like this privilege is being checked, your power is being checked. Just keep your ish intact, so that you're not perpetuating some kind of disempowerment onto people. As a light-skinned woman, I have to make sure when I'm in spaces, I'm not just allowing people to talk reckless about people who are darker skinned. I am a light-skinned woman. I am in a position of privilege. So I am going to call people out who fetishize me for being light-skinned. I'm going to call people out who are demonizing, criminalizing darker skinned women, because it's a problem. And I can't sit just and be in silence as a light-skinned woman like, wow, that's how you feel? I have to use my privilege. I have to use my power to do something about it. But at the same time, I cannot be in a space and see a dark-skinned woman get an award and be like, but what about me? I'm abusing my power as a light-skinned woman, looking for attention, trying to insert myself in that woman's experience. So just like be mindful of your privilege, but also be mindful of the kind of privileges that other people have, because they can abuse their privilege by feeling disempowered in somewhere where they're actually empowered all the time. Yeah.
Well, no, Jocelyn, I think that's amazing. And I love the example of the award, right? And I just want to expand on that a little bit, because we also live in a society that makes us feel, well, because there is limited resources, right? Mm-hmm. So this fighting we feel that we have to have with each other, right, is intentional, because if we're busy fighting with each other, we're not busy fighting the people who actually have the power, right? So yeah, I think it's just really important that we like, you have to be hyper vigilant, looking at what privileges you have and checking them. And we're gonna fuck up, right?
Yeah.
Like, fuck up, right?
We're human. We're totally okay with messing up. The thing about messing up is being open to being called out for messing up and accepting when you mess up. Like, taking accountability for your actions is everything. Is that if I am a light-skinned woman and I am inserting myself in a way that is disempowering someone and I don't realize it, even if I do realize it, someone being like, this is not your moment right now, is fine. I can't, well, I just wanted to, but I just feel like I have to go, oh, I'm doing it again. And be okay with it. That moment's not going to carry on with you forever. You're not going to burst into flames when someone calls you out for being wrong. It's not going to happen. So we have 4 questions in the chat. Well, we have 3 questions in the chat, and they're all really good. So I want to do them together with you.
Yes. So I saw the first one, and I want to say first, right, like the first question is about when people say, I'm just summarizing, when people say, if you know you're going somewhere where like men might take advantage of you, why would you wear something revealing, right? And how would you respond? And I just want to say, I will answer very briefly, but you're going to hear me talk about sexual violence
every time.
For a lot.
Every day. Every day.
In the next few weeks. So I do want to say, like no answer is going to be sufficient enough yet. But don't worry. This is like what we're here to do, right? We are an agency that supports survivors of sexual and domestic violence. So all we talk about is sexual and domestic violence
all day.
Also know that if we want to talk about sexual and domestic violence, we also have to talk about other types of violence, right? Because they're all connected. But so I will just briefly say that people make choices, right, to make themselves feel safer. So even though I have worked at Peace Over Violence for years, and I know in my bones that what I'm wearing will not just like be the determining factor if someone rapes me or not. Every morning, I know that. When I take Metro to work and it's 90 degrees outside, I still have a moment where I'm like, do I want to wear that tank top? Right? Am I going to be inviting more comments? And I do this work, and I know that's not the reason, right? Because I've also lived in an experience where I'm wearing a hoodie, baggy pants, and you can't even see me, and I'm hungover, and people are still catcalling, right? So I know it's not about what I'm wearing. But again, we do certain things because we don't have power over them, right? I don't have power and control over someone catcalling. I don't have power and control over someone raping me or not, right? Really. So I might make little decisions that I think make me feel more powerful, right? So of course people, but again, it's not about what you're wearing, right? It's about power and dominance. So, but yes, that's my brief answer. I don't know if you want to say anything, Jocelyn, but we will be.
No, that was basically going to be it. Is that exactly? The next question: How can power be used for good? Just like I said, I'm a light-skinned woman. If I see somebody talking reckless about dark-skinned women, I'm on their head. I'm on you. I am on you. I am a person of privilege, and I feel empowered. I feel I have the power to speak up, because I'm not going to get called the horrible names that dark-skinned women get called. I'm not going to get attacked in that same way. Have I been attacked? Yes, but not for that reason and not in the same way. And I can identify that. And so it's important for me to use my power to call people out. I'm also an ally in the community for youth. So it's important for me to use my power to think of opportunities for youth, to connect youth to people, like to advocate for my youth, especially if some of my youth like are having issues with their teachers or their principals, even if they're in college. Like, I am still advocating for my collegiate youth. Like, who do you need me to talk to? You need me to advocate for you? I have kids I was a one-on-one with. You need me to come up to your college and talk to your professor? I'll be right in the room with you, because I have that power where I feel I'm able to advocate in those ways. And if someone wants to feel more empowered and wants me there, that's how you can use your power for good. Did I answer? You think I answered that all right?
Yeah, and I think all of this is about doing research, finding out if you're part of a certain community and you have privilege and you want to support a different community, right? Read, like read what that community says they need, right?
Literally.
Don't make, and again, all of this comes down to not making assumptions, right? Because also, you might feel like, okay, well, I have the power in this situation because of what I've learned about race or gender or sexuality, right? Or beauty privilege, right? I have the power in this space. And then someone might tell you, actually, you don't, right? Like, I don't need you, right? So there's so again, it's never making an assumption and just researching what that community wants and what that community needs.
Yeah, agreed. What would you say is the difference between privilege and power? I find it hard to find any difference. What about you, Hannah?
I think they're intricately connected, right? Like, I think they're very hard to separate. Privilege. But I also know that people, right, like we talked about this kind of the other day about how people get confused privilege with power because they feel like they don't have power. And then when someone says no to a poor white person, right, like, no, you have privilege, they get very mad because their response is, but I don't. Like, I don't have any money. I don't have this. I've been
right.
So I think it's important that we just always tie it back. You cannot talk about privilege without talking about race, right? Or gender or sexuality or class.
Yeah.
And it's the same with power. Actually, you know what? I kind of want to do something real quick for those that are still here.
Yes.
I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to do a little activity that's a really great example of this, right? So, when we talk about power, I like to think about it as an iceberg. So I'm going to draw a very ugly iceberg. Okay. It's kind of like an iceberg, right? Is it beautiful? Okay.
It's great. That's amazing.
And then right on top, under this, let me see if I can, then we have the water, right?
That definition for privilege, I don't think we do. I don't think we have a set definition.
Okay, so here's my iceberg, right? It's as good as it's gonna get. In our society, right, our society is very like an iceberg, which is why I have it here. And like an iceberg, you only see, like 95% of the iceberg is underwater and you can't see it, right? but it exists. Who in our society has power, right? And you can throw them into the chat and I'll put them up here, but I think we know, right? It's like men is one. We have white, we have rich, we have able-bodied, we have cis. Do we know what cis is? Do you want to define cis real quick for folks, Joss?
So to be a cisgendered person is to be a person that is that identifies as the gender that they were identified by their parents at birth. So my parents identified me as a girl at birth, and I have continued identifying as a girl onto being a woman, and I identify as a cisgendered woman. There are people that don't have that experience, and thus they are not cisgendered. They are wherever they land on the spectrum of human.
Oh, I saw Christian. I'm gonna put that. That's a great one. Older. Okay, yeah, definitely. I saw age. So I would put like, let me find my thing. I would say elders, right? Like like elders or adults. Okay. Educated.
While you finish that and like respond to the chat and stuff, I'm just gonna answer this question.
Yeah, go for it.
How do you feel about people who get offended when you point out their privilege? Example, cis Black women who are unprotected but don't recognize trans Black women have it worse. So just like we were saying earlier, people are gonna feel triggered when their privilege is called out, especially if they are in an oppressed demographic. It's totally possible to be an oppressed demographic and still have privilege. That's the kind of nuance of existing in this world. But it's about being empathetic to other people's experience and being humble enough to recognize that you aren't the only one that has it, you know, bad. Just like Hannah was saying earlier, like if you're in America, you're traumatized, like period. There's no way that you're existing in this world and you're not traumatized. But people respond differently. People have different levels of how, like people, different kinds of trauma that happen to them. And so it's being open to like understanding someone's experience and not kind of playing like war stories, like, oh, mine is worse than yours in this way, but like recognizing that you may be a person of privilege and not perpetuating more abuse onto other more oppressed demographics. So if a cis Black woman, and this happens all the time because we as Black women are like constantly in positions of oppression, but it is important as cisgendered Black women, we realize that trans Black women do have a far worse, far more dangerous experience, and that we could perpetuate that violence with transphobic rhetoric, especially if we're triggered. So it's important that cisgendered Black women take a second to pull back, because you wouldn't want a Black man saying to you, you don't have as hard, what about us? What about us? And as a Black woman, we're going, okay, hold on. We there, but I have violence that I experience too. And it's a little bit worse than yours, but I mean, we're experiencing violence and you should welcome me so we can heal together. That same conversation has to happen between cis women and trans women, where cis women go, yeah, my violence is bad, but like, I'm not gonna contribute to your violence by making it seem like my violence trumps your violence, or that your violence shouldn't exist because my violence is existing right now. Like, miss me, we're all Black women and we have to heal. And there's no way that we can heal and protect each other if we're fighting each other as Black women. So.
Oh, yes. I just want to add a couple more because I'm seeing people.
Do your thing. There's one more.
Let's say English speaking.
Oh yes, English speaking for sure.
Right. Okay. So we have this iceberg, right? Which I've said. Just like an iceberg, this is who's in power, right? And this is who we see. Think about the tree we did on Tuesday, right? when we talked about media, religion, politics, right? All of these education, all these institutions, who do we see, right? Our society is like the iceberg in which we see only this on the top, right? So then, but what else is there, right? So like, this is who's in power. What about underneath the iceberg? Who is here? And throw it into the chat if you want, right? Minority.
Are they able to like make additions to this like they did yesterday? I have no idea how Taiwana did that, but it was so lit. That was so lit. I'm sorry.
But I also, so we have minorities, LGBTQ, yes, lower class, right? So like poor, middle class, differently abled, yes, 100%. Who else is under here? Uneducated, BIPOC, yeah, people of color, middle class, working class, yeah. This is not a tier, right? Like you're gonna, autoimmune, compromised, unsuccessful, immigrants, young people, indigenous, children.
I love that. Children.
And what I wanna say is you can keep throwing these down there, right? But the key is, who is, right, this is who's in power. What else is down here? I just like to say, right? Right? We could go off all day.
The world.
We could go off all day, right? But if you are not all of these things, then you are down here.
Period.
And if you aren't educated, if you aren't born in the US and English speaking, right? If you aren't a man, if you aren't beautiful, if you aren't cis, right? If you aren't rich, if you aren't Christian, if you aren't heterosexual, or even because Jocelyn and I are both queer, we like to talk about like, we're in relationships with men right now.
Right.
So even though we are that, we get hetero passing privilege, right?
Yep.
On the street, when I'm walking down the street holding, I don't even like holding hands, but like whatever, like when I'm walking down the street.
Right. People are like, oh, a couple.
Yeah.
Like, and then it's just that. It's just, a couple.
We're
but
not
then like,
we're not going to be questioned. We're not going to be like get uncomfortable glances or someone muttering.
Especially walking around with DJ Show. Ain't nobody saying a word with nobody. Nobody's, if you've seen my partner, ain't nobody saying shit. But keep going.
Yes. Right. So the key is everybody else. And I actually saw someone, Abby said, I feel like the above water population is a minority compared to everybody else. Yes.
Literally.
Right? Like
literally that.
This is what we mean when we say the 1%.
Yep.
Right? Not all of us can fit into this above the iceberg, right? I might have some categories that go up there. Jocelyn might have some categories that go up there, right?
I got 3.
But we don't have all of them, so we are all down here.
Yep.
Whether we want to or not.
And this is the thing that is really important when we think of social media, okay? Social media, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, all your favorite social media apps placate, is that the word? Placate and pander to the top part of the iceberg. Everything that they want to show you is that. And so when we realize, we've all just agreed that top part is just the 1%, what kind of sense does it make for them to be advertising the top of the iceberg when 99% of us are the bottom of the iceberg? That makes no sense. And so when you think of the way that people defend celebrities, and you think of like the influence that celebrities have on people, these very rich, these very beautiful, able-bodied, all of these people pushing this narrative onto 99% of the population who cannot, I was just saying this, they cannot survive alone. In total isolation, 99% of us cannot survive in isolation. So yes, our favorite celebrities may be saying, oh, I don't need a relationship. I'm totally fine. But you're out partying with Lady Gaga and you get a Gucci bag as soon as it comes out, you get it before it hits the line. You get invited to New York Fashion Week and you're sitting alongside Mary-Kate and Ashley. Like, you are like so disgustingly affluent that your experience and all of the ways in which you satiate or you soothe yourself in your loneliness do not apply to me, the 99%. That's the part that like I try to keep in mind when I talk to people about the way that they support celebrities. You can love them all day. I follow celebrities too, but it's about the ways, like Hannah was saying last week, how do we invest in these celebrities? Are they investing back? Do they reflect, do they reflect our true experiences? They don't. So yeah, that's all.
Are they donating 90% of their wealth?
Are they redistributing the wealth?
I don't think, look, I love Beyonce, right? Like I love Beyonce. I've seen her live. I'm obsessed, right? Even she, like, I'm like, she's a celebrity, right? Like
She's a celebrity.
I can wax poetic all day about her, right?
Yes.
But at the end of the day, we have to understand that that is also a power they hold, and they use it to mask what's really going on, right? And the fact that they have so much power and they could single-handedly feed everyone in this country, right? Everyone in the world, and they don't.
3 times over.
Right? Like, and there's things that they can do that are good, and we appreciate those, I guess, right? Like, but at the end of the day, what's actually going to make a difference is if we all are equal. And if you donate $1 million, but you have $1 billion, that doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
To me, that's kind of empty, because that's like me donating $5, which Edwin and I, our friend, you're not gonna get to meet, unfortunately, but
I'm like, please remind me.
we joke all the time, because we keep Venmoing each other the same $20, right? Like back and forth, we Venmo each other. We should just have one $20 bill that we hand back and forth, right? Because we're always there to support each other, right? But we all only have that $20, right?
Yep.
So again, so yeah, I see people saying like, oh, the 1% makes sense now. And that's what I love to fucking see, right? Like these terms that even like for us, like we have to kind of break down and say, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And then I just want to draw our attention again to the tree that we did last time, right? This 1%, right? This top of the iceberg is who is visible, right? And who the world is catered to. So we've said you don't go to a movie theater and have captions as an option automatically.
Right.
You don't go to school, right? A college, university, and they say, oh, you didn't pass your SATs, don't worry about it.
At all.
This is who is visible, and this is who has control, right? And is controlling the narrative. So this is who's visible in those, you know, whenever I see Trump signing a new executive order, look at who's he's surrounded by. Like when you
He's surrounded by elder white men and maybe 2 white women.
Yes, and sometimes he likes to throw in like a little
He'll throw in an other, right? He'll be like, you.
Yeah.
That's literally, I feel like how he does it. He goes, oh, where are all of my people of color? Put him in the hallway. I need to look at him. Yeah, let me get that one. I like your tie. This is the one we're going to bring with us. There's like no thoughtful interaction with these people. You don't care about their experience. And what's more, you have so much power because, again, top of the iceberg, you have so much power. I am so disempowered. I'm not even going to speak up for myself or my demographic. Kanye West.
Well, yeah, see, this is what I mean. So like, these are the people who are controlling the TV we have access to. These are the people controlling the, like, even like going up to the medium, Zoom, right? Like, what is this medium that we're using? We have to use it. We're relying on it. Who created it, right? Like, again, so we have to look at who's controlling the narrative, who's controlling what education we have. And it all comes down to this iceberg, right? So yeah, that's just like, I always like to kind of end with the iceberg. I think it's an incredibly helpful visual. And yeah, like I said, like we can go all day. We can go like trans people, we could go Latinx people, we could go women, we could go differently able, but why don't we just say everybody else? Because that's the truth, right? So we are gonna hang out. We're done for today, but we are gonna hang out. If you have any questions, I saw one in the chat, I think. Well,
I was gonna say, Abby was asking where could they find like good news that's like valid and like not, and you know what, I have to be honest, America's media is very convoluted. So the only thing that I can suggest, maybe Hannah has another suggestion, the only thing I can suggest is to check multiple sources. Is when you hear something or you read about something and it almost seems too good to be true or too unbelievable, check another source, number one, or a few sources. And then another thing is some of the stuff that's happening in America right now is as outlandish as it sounds. That's like another part that if you're not in America, it may seem too wild to be true, but as of late it is. Yeah, as of late, every wild thing you're hearing is true. Celebrities disappearing off of boats, 18-year-old boys being shot in the back at work, people being hit in the face with rubber bullets at peaceful protests, tear gassing kids, all of that is actually happening. So I don't know if you're looking for something to verify that, but yeah, that's happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree. It's multiple sources, right? Like, and it's never taking what you say. Like I know it's very easy, like on Twitter or whatever, like to read something and go, oh my God, like, like be overcome, but it's always just taking a second to question, right? Like, and I think, like someone said NPR, I listen to NPR every day almost, like, or I used to when I used to go to work. Now I don't listen to the radio.
Wow. I mean, they're based in Culver City, so like it makes sense. People in LA like love NPR.
But what I was gonna say is they fuck up a lot too. And right, like who is still controlling the news, right? So again, power is power, and it infiltrates every one of our systems, everything we do. Again, we rely, like I would say, like I rely on most of my news. I think No Name, there's a news organization under No Name that has is a great resource, and they're trying to get more funding. But I do a lot of, I just follow people on Twitter. Like my Twitter is this is what I open actually to get the news, because the only thing in like the New York Times is like coronavirus, like one story about coronavirus. And then I'm like, okay, but like what's actually
right? And what's actually happening? And Twitter goes, we have 100,000 deaths today. Here's the news.
And 90% of them are poor people of color. And then I go,
look. And you're like freaking out because you're like, wow, because they also are planning to experiment on people of color in there.
Everything that you think is too crazy to be true, essentially, the answer is it's not. I know you all know this. So yeah, okay, let me see what else. Yeah, I love Washington Post, but it is owned by Jeff Bezos, so.
All I heard was Jeff Bezos. What happened?
Well, no, we're talking about news, and Yoko said Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, and I said, yes, correct. It's insane.
It's literally like being in Gotham City. It's like being in Gotham City. How does a billionaire get to own a reputable news source?
Well, because news is failing, and billionaires are the only ones who can keep it afloat, but then they control the narrative, right? Like, this is what we're talking about.
And that's what I was going to say. That's literally an abuse of power and control. If you all needed help coming up with examples of abuses of power and control, a billionaire owning a reputable news source that distributes news to common, regular, normal, everyday 99%ers is a bad idea, because it's not the news of the people, from the people, by the people, for the people. It's news cultivated and strategically placed in front of normal, common, everyday 99%ers, right? I'm talking about all of the people who are not the type of the iceberg, because we're the normal ones, right? Okay, and so then it's like all of this information, and it's all catered to, I guarantee you, every article, I've read enough Washington Post to consider it a tabloid at this point, but it's like every article is so fluffy and just so almost useless. And if it's not useless, it's fear driven. And if it's not fear driven, it's some kind of advertisement. And like how useful is that in the middle of a pandemic? That is an abuse of power and control. And more than anything, that's violence. You are not getting news from the people, by the people, for the people. That is a billionaire's news. So yeah, Twitter is what Abby say. Twitter is my info source for 99% of what I know. All you have to do is read a Twitter post and then go verify it somewhere. Yes. If you have to go, please go. I know you all have classes at 1 and 12:45 and stuff like that. We're just here to field questions. Go on ahead and do your thing. Hannah, were you able to keep those screenshots? I took a picture of the iceberg, but were you able to snag that ab use one? Or maybe we can get Luis to make us one.
I'll make them. Yeah, and I'll be sending out the record. You're gonna get a crazy email from me either today or tomorrow with all the links for next week, all the recordings, right? All of this stuff. You're gonna get an insane email. So read all of it.
I'm so excited. You all are amazing. Yeah. Today's your Hidden Figures debrief. Again, just today at 4:30. It'll be short. I just want to see how you all felt about the movie. So yeah, it's going to be super short. I'm really excited because Hidden Figures is actually kind of one of my favorite movies now. I don't know how that happened, but it happened. It's Taraji P. Henson. You know, my dad calls Tekashi 6ix9ine Taraji 6ix9ine, and I don't think he knows that he's doing it. He's like, that kid Taraji 6ix9ine is just crazy. And I'm like,
close, but not, no.
But he's like, we've had multiple conversations. He's like, Taraji 6ix9ine is just, damn it, Taraji. I'm like,
I'm impressed he even knows who he is.
I'm surprised that he even knows who both of those people are to combine them. I'm surprised that he knows that they are both relevant celebrities and just made them a smorgasbord of like celebrity. Yes, you're all welcome. Thank you so much. I don't even know how he did that. But he was like adamant, especially the week that Tekashi 6ix9ine got out of prison. He was like, Taraji 6ix9ine is out of prison. Can you believe it? I'm like, Dad, because you know my dad's history, like gang member. So I'm like, he's like, I can't believe they're letting snitches out of prison. This is unbelievable. I just can't believe this. And Taraji's just out there. Rainbow hair. I just can't believe this shit. I was like,
it's like abolish prisons, but also
Taraji. Okay. All right, here we are. We've arrived. All right, y'all. I just want to see